you just get all discombobulated. That's very rude to men. It's very stupid about masculinities. It assumes they're all the same. And it seeks to reinscribe the male gaze as the origin of law. And we need to recognize that the question of gender dynamics as including the process of becoming gendered as men is absolutely integral to the work of African feminism. There's a lot we could say about this. I've got 5 more minutes. Some general principles, and if you want particular readings about this, I'm very happy to point this to you. But this is something Sylvia raised yesterday. We are looking at the process of being moved from your identification as male through into a masculinity. It's a lifelong process. It does not happen at that moment of birth. Certain things happen. They carry predictions, but the actual process of becoming gendered involves age, it involves time, it involves space, and it never, ever, ever stops. And I want to pick up that point in particular for theorizing masculinity in a moment. It's deeply political, and it is possible to fail. It is possible to fail drastically, to the point of suicidal despair. You can fail masculinity badly. And many of the things that are currently happening within our context involve threats to the possibility of achieving masculinity that are in fact terrorizing in many, many spaces. And we need to look at that. What do I mean, fail masculinity? Kopano Ratele, now I'm going to come back to this. Kopano Ratele's piece, he's looking at what he calls analyzing males. He's deliberately using the word, he's South African, he's a psychologist. And he's using the word male as that sexy term. And he is very clear that the gap between being sexed as male and being regarded as inhabiting a successful masculinity is vast. That masculinity, he believes, in fact, is often only aspirational. That you might one day get to being a real man. And I'm talking about ideas. I'm talking about rituals. I'm talking about status. That yes, you may have that penis. Whether you are a man, within your context, that is up for debate. And that debate is lifelong. It's lifelong. And Kopano Ratele is very, very interested in how that debate is lived as personal and political experience. Just to go back to here, that actually, let me return to an example that Sylvia raised right at the beginning of yesterday's talk. I'm sure this is something that has happened to you all. You have been walking along in the taxi or the street or wherever, university, somewhere, sporting ground, cinema, somewhere, and you have seen someone, right? And you don't know whether they are a man or a woman. Has that happened?
Oh yes.
Oh yes. What do you do?
We just startled.
Okay, you stare, you're startled. Okay. Basically, I mean, many of us would do different things, but me, I'm not so much interested in this example about whether it's hostility or interest or fear, or, I mean, we can talk about what these impress. I'm interested in the fact that we stop. no matter who we are. We come from so many different places in this room, so many. We stop for a microsecond or for 10 minutes. We are paralyzed. We can't continue shopping or talking or listening on our phone or catching the bus. That is very funny. What is it that has the capacity to paralyze us so? And then what do? We look, right? Janet saying this day. What are we looking for? Will it talk? Maybe it will have a deep voice. Has it got a bump in its neck? What about those wrists? Are those bumps here real? How is it walking? I can tell. It's a man pretending to be a woman. It's a woman pretending to be a man. It's not a woman. It's not a man. It is a man. It's not a man. Right. Whatever that says about the reality of that person, and that's something we can get into later, it says something about us. And I want to take it. And us is very different. So like the fact that we didn't know about our tiam, the fact that we do this is an interesting commonality. What are the systems in which we have been brought to this point? But actually, it is impossible for us to be recognized as human beings unless we can be gendered on the spot, and unless a sexuality is assumed to be predicted from that recognition. For masculinities, this is particularly powerful. In some ways, womanhood has it a bit easier within the norms, because if you're coded as a woman, then you are a sexual object, finished. It's a problem. But masculinities face an even bigger problem, because you can be recognized you have to be recognized as a man. If you're not recognized as a man, you're not even a human being. What is that thing? You are a thing. In all our languages we have this. You're just a thing. To be a man is what is required to be a human being. You can have fingers. You can have a heart. Boop, boop, boop. You can have a brain. You don't have your masculinity in order? Oh, oh, oh. Goodbye for you. Tell me this is not a serious political problem. And how are masculinities created? Peer relationships, through dichotomized men, they're ritualized, they involve the incarnation, the habitation of space, they're deeply linguistic, they're fluid. But my question that I want us to discuss when we come back is, for masculinities, is if you are born with a penis, is it possible to grow up as a human being? Are you condemned to living as a man for the whole of your life? Is that the space we are in? Because if that is true, then we need to recognize that and to start from that space. Is it possible to be a human being if you have a penis and not be primarily identified as a man? I'm not saying identification as a man is good or bad. It's essential. In many ways, I'm asking a philosophical question about masculinity. And it is the same question that Kopano Ratele is asking, although I am asking it in simpler ways, because he is looking at the fact, he's looking at he thinks of himself as an African feminist, and he says so. He wants to extend the debates about masculinities. He's looking at the intersections of what he calls the psychosocial and the political, of experiences of maleness. In other words, maleness being born with a penisness in different contexts. And he's saying he needs to look at age and intersections of age and unemployment and masculinities. How do you get, in different contexts, given different economies, different religions, different political systematicities, how do you accrue viable masculinity? What happens when you lose it, even temporarily? Should it be lost? Is it useful? Is it not useful? How is it experienced as a resource? How is it experienced as a burden? What does it mean if that experience is constantly in interaction with major forces such as unemployment, such as the demographics of our countries, in which there are so many more younger people than older people? How do we think about the connection between being identified as male and this seemingly so vital component of our citizenship, masculinity? What does that mean? Particularly when we cannot assume, as he says, that there's any one form of masculinity. We need to we have a notion that there's heterogeneous ways of accruing masculinities, of using them, deploying them, sometimes violently, sometimes not. Where does violence come in? Where is it not even a possibility? And how does political and economic space enter this very difficult, both theoretical and personal space, which is very rarely allowed speech, let alone theory? And that's where we're going to stop for today and have a break. I hope you've written lots and lots of questions. I will send all the slides to you, but let's take a breather.